Thank you, Miss Lorna. Presentation is helpful for us. 我想哦，接下来的时间我是不是可以开放给大家来提问我想那个很难得的机会，因为刚时间太短了那我觉得一定大家有很多的疑问，我想大家也可以用中文来提问。好，我们这边还是会有人来询问，来翻译的那或者如果有一些要直接用英文也可以。有没有哪一位要先来请教我们那个 Miss Rana 的？有没有哪一位？还是刚刚听的有点不太清楚哪一位来，请please。
Thank you. I'm Zohra Luqman. I'm representing Pakistan and I'm working as a gender advisor with GIC, it's German International Cooperation. Thank you so much, Bandana Rana. Every time I feel proud to hear you because you are so strong lady, and especially in case of shelters and women's rights. And you are chairperson of Global Network. I applied for the membership and hope so I will get membership with Global Network on behalf of Pakistan. And just one small suggestion which I want to give in this conference, and I hope so, at the end we will agree that there is need of capacity building of these shelter managers, these shelter representatives. So we should think on this regard also, that because as we agreed that it's not government priority, the shelter. So we have to build our capacity how to manage shelter most I will say in effective way. So I hope so we agree at the end of this conference. Thanks.
I answer that? Well, I think I agree totally with you that the shelter officials need capacity building, not once, not twice, but several times constantly, because they are dealing with very sensitive issues that are very heavy on the mind and on the psychosocial being of a woman. So a retreat or refresher is constantly required, and I think this is something that we need to discuss as we go forward in our Asian network, and what could be our different agendas. So you have started that off. During lunch we will discuss on this further.
简单翻译一下，就是我们来自巴基斯坦这位代表，他跟我们提到说，如何就是我们在安置中心的工作是非常劳心劳力，负担很大，如何能够更有效的能够来推动这些工作？那冯妈妈她也提到说，事实上我们对于我们安置中心的工作人员，可能要有一套不同的方式，能够帮助他们。能够在这么大的工作的负担上能够重新得力，然后不管是透过一些就是会休或者是一些就是一些特别的retreat 这样子的聚会，能够帮助他们重新恢复活力。那这个也是我们中午今明2天的中午，我们都会有一个。亚洲的代表的讨论会，会针对亚洲的庇护所的最佳方案和安置策略，我们会有更进一步的讨论和分享。所以，要是各位在场有任何的想法或者是任何的意见，也都很欢迎大家能够提出来，让我们知道。谢谢。
还有没有提问的？我想很难得的机会哦。
我们可以会翻译我想应该没有问题。当然可以中文来提问，没有关系。有没有特别要询问的？有没有要提问？这一位有没有？刚刚听的内容还了解吗？了解嘛好。还有没有要询问？那我们那个是不是再交给那个 Miss Rana 再特别再介绍多一点点，好不好？
Thank you. Okay, either you did not understand anything that I said, or or I was so clear that I made you dumbfounded and you cannot speak. But I think this is an open forum. If there's anything that you would want to share, we still have 10 minutes. Is that what it is? We still have 10 minutes. And to go a little further on the global network of women shelters, it's heavily, very few from Asia at the moment. We are in the interim board. We are my friend Panin from Vietnam, and I am there in the interim board. And I think someone from Pakistan, but
Yeah, she was from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Now I'm working on
you are on, because I haven't actually seen her. So what we need to do is, as we go these 2 days ahead, we really need to see how we can, because the need is, we need a strong Asian voice at a global level. We are different. We share different challenges. In most of the European and American countries, in Canada, the shelters are supported by the government. In Amsterdam, I went to visit a shelter in Amsterdam in the last board meeting, and we were surprised at the affluence that the shelters have. I don't know how the shelters are here, but I can see that. I was so surprised with the kind of shelters they have. They have private rooms, not only private rooms, private apartments, and they can keep their children, and they have badminton courts and squash and television in every rooms. And then I remember in one of our shelters in the district, in the rural area, at one point we had this Spice Girl, I forget her name, Spice Girl, the singer. She was the ambassador for violence against women, nominated by UNFPA. So she had come to Nepal, and UNFPA had her visits scheduled. And then she came to one of our rural shelter. And of course, with her camera crew and television and photographer and all that, So I had to first say, what is possible and what is not possible. And she came to our shelter and said, "You mean the women share the rooms? There are 4, 5, 6 women in a room? They don't have a separate room for themselves? No separate bathroom? How do they say?" This is the reality in the Asian context. So maybe they do not even understand the different contexts in the different Asian countries. Even to have a shared room, a shelter over you, a clothing, some kind of security and legal support is a huge help in Asia. For them, that is not the basic necessity. That was like inhuman. How can you keep, 7, 8 women in one room? So these are the realities that we have to tell the world. These are the challenges that we have to tell the world. For them, even the minutest kind of violence may require a shelter or support. For us, the woman has been tormented for years and years and years and years. And only when they have some few women, only when they have the confidence to walk out of the home, when it becomes extremely unbearable, that is when the woman comes out of the house. So, these are things that we need to share at the global level. And I think one of the strongest need for an Asian conference is to share our experiences, of course, is to be stronger, and particularly to strengthen our advocacy. Strengthen our advocacy for financial support, for psychosocial support, for legal support. My colleague here mentioned about the domestic violence legislation in Taiwan. 15 years, you said now, no? We had our domestic violence legislation. When we opened the shelter, we were so happy, excited. Finally, we can give shelter to women. And then we realized when we want to give them justice, there is no law. So we started lobbying for the law. After 15 years of lobbying intensely and persistently, only in 2009, we have a domestic violence law now. And we celebrated, we said, wow, we have a law now, without realizing, one challenge after another. First, you make awareness, but when the women come out of the violent homes, there's no support. Then you provide a shelter, and then you want them to get justice, there is no law. And then you advocate for law all the time, and finally you have a law, and now you realize it's not implemented. So a lot of advocacy and awareness is still required consistently. I did hear that the implementation of law is improving, and when you get more reports, of course it could be the awareness level. Women have started coming out of the house and talking about it. So this is where, again, we need to learn. We need to learn as Asian sisters, what are the laws, what are the policies. Maybe you have some good practices where the law is effectively being implemented. We need to learn from those practices. We need to learn in the initial years when we opened the shelter, young, vulnerable, all of us also, and we realized we had set an agenda. 6 months is the maximum time we keep the woman in a shelter. Until then we hope to find some. But then after 6 months we realized we still haven't found a job for her, she still has financial burdens, and some of the women, let me tell you, running the shelter also has bitter experiences. Sometimes the very women that you support will turn back at you and say, oh, you have used me, you have raised money in my name, and today you want me to, they become so dependable, they don't do the work. At times, there are certain instances when the women themselves have a backlash on us, without realizing the pain that we go through for doing all this. So in the initial stages, we were so vulnerable. Women, even though when we assign work to the women and they don't do, because we don't want them to be dependent. We want them to be independent, to be able to make their own choices. That is what we are trying to do. Show them the options, and they are empowered to make their own choices. But many a times, frustrating times are when the women who we have supported backlash at us. One. The second, when the women who have repeatedly been severely physically beaten, acid prone, part of her body, and in Bangladesh acid is a big problem, part of her body is mutilated, but repeatedly she goes back to the husband and the next time comes much more severely beaten. Because it is her choice. We only show the way. We cannot dictate and tell the women that you don't do this is wrong. It is for them to make the judgment. But we create an environment to show them what impact their options could be. So they enter into a relationship or their decision in a very informed mind. So these are frustrations. We know it is wrong. We know she's going to be beaten the next time much more severely. But in spite of that, she goes back. Because the identity of being a wife of someone, being married, is much, much more important than the physical battering that she gets. So these are types of frustrations we have. And then no law, like I was talking about. So I mean, all of you are nodding your heads. I am sure you have been, if you are running shelters, if you are working on violence against women, to some extent you have all come across such challenges. So these challenges need to be brought together, need to be voiced out. We need to have a strong voice with donors and supporters and financial supporters to say this is important. And I have the hope, looking at the participants around from 14 countries, and next year I'm sure we'll have many more countries, that we can be stronger, we can have a collective voice. So let us discuss this during lunch and come up with a framework to strengthen our Asian network, to have a stronger voice at a global level.
我们今天要特别谢谢Miss Nona 做了这么好的一个很精湛的，刚刚对我们今天这个活动1连3天做了最好的开场那我想刚刚这样的一个开始，事实上可以开始，等一下我们接下来有很多的场次都可以对我们这个安置的议题，大家可以来进一步的去思考。我想刚刚我们Miss Nona 在提到，也是提到这样的议题对于妇女。 怎么样让她自力更生走出来是一件非常非常重要的议题，如何去 empower 她，其实是非常重要的那我想今天早上的第一场我们就要到这边，我们是不是再一次以热烈的掌声，谢谢我们 Miss Nona 对我们做这么精彩的一个演讲。Let's thank Miss Nona, thank you.